How far would a country go to avenge its fallen heroes? What does harsh vengeance really mean in the context of international relations and military strategy? In the realm of international politics, the concept of harsh vengeance often takes on a more complex and nuanced meaning. This became particularly apparent when Iran vowed to retaliate for the killing of their revered General Qasem Soleimani in January 2020. The ramifications of this vow have reverberated across the globe as Iran has taken up the mantle of harsh vengeance. One of the most notable manifestations of this strategy is the charge against Shahram Poursafi, a member of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. The Department of Justice accuses Poursafi of plotting to assassinate former National Security Advisor John Bolton, a move that was allegedly in retaliation for Soleimani's death. This plot is a stark example of the lengths Iran is willing to go in its quest for vengeance. But it's not just about retaliation. This act also bears the hallmarks of a broader strategy aimed at escalating tensions between the US and Iran. The killing of Soleimani, a key figure in Iranian military and political circles, has indeed heightened fears of a potential conflict between the two countries. Yet both sides appear to have avoided a broader war, at least so far. Instead, they engage in a high-stakes game of political chess, making strategic moves and counter-moves that keep the world on edge. And so we find ourselves in the midst of an unfolding saga, a tale of vengeance, strategy and power. This leads us to ponder, what does this harsh vengeance imply for the future of US-Iran relations? As we delve deeper into this narrative, we must keep this question in mind, for it will shape the trajectory of this international drama. In the game of international politics, every action has a reaction, but how effective are these reactions really? In the grand chessboard of global affairs, the United States decided to make a move in response to Iran's alleged plots of assassination. This move came in the form of sanctions. These sanctions were imposed on officials of Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, including figures such as Mohammad Reza Ansari and Hossein Hafez Amini. These individuals were accused of plotting assassinations against former US officials, including the likes of John Bolton and Mike Pompeo. The sanctions also targeted other IRGC intelligence organization officials, such as Ruhollah Bazgandi and Reza Seraj, for their alleged involvement in covert operations in Iraq, Syria, and against Israeli nationals. The Biden administration's objective behind these sanctions was clear: to disrupt IRGC plots and protect human rights advocates within Iran. But the question that arises is, how effective are these sanctions in achieving their intended purpose? Sanctions are a tool of diplomacy, often used to express disapproval and exert pressure on a nation to change its course of action. In theory, they should work. They should deter nations from engaging in activities that are deemed harmful or threatening by the international community. However, the reality often tells a different story. In the case of Iran, the country has been under various forms of sanctions for decades, yet the alleged assassination plots and other hostile activities suggest that these sanctions may not be having the intended deterrent effect. Instead, they might be fueling a sense of resentment and defiance, pushing Iran further down the path of confrontation. Moreover, sanctions often have unintended consequences, impacting the lives of ordinary citizens more than the officials they target. They can lead to economic hardship and contribute to a sense of nationalistic fervor, further entrenching the positions of hardliners who are less likely to bow to international pressure. Sanctions, a tool of diplomacy or a mere show of power, the impact remains to be seen. As the chessboard continues to change, we must wait and watch to see if these sanctions will indeed deter Iran, or if they will merely serve as another move in an increasingly complex game of global politics. In the face of adversity, some call for peace, others call for war. But what happens when the call for war is veiled under the guise of defending the oppressed? The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Quds Force commander's speech paints a vivid picture of Iran's stance on its perceived enemies. The commander passionately proclaims Iran's harsh vengeance against its adversaries and those who oppose the Muslims. These words echo the sentiment of a nation that has been at odds with the West, particularly the United States, for years. The speech is laden with incendiary language, labeling America as the global arrogance and the front of falsehood. The commander accuses the United States of hypocrisy, alleging that while the US condemned the terror attack at Soleimani's memorial ceremony, behind the scenes it was inciting and training terrorists against Iran and other nations. It's a powerful accusation, suggesting a deep-seated belief that America is not only an adversary, but also a malevolent force working against the interests of Iran and the broader Muslim community. This belief is not isolated to this commander or the IRGC. It's a sentiment that has been echoed by many within Iran's political and military hierarchy. Furthermore, the commander asserts that the Iranian nation and the resistance axis are continuing on their path, enduring pain and torment towards the victory of Islam and the front of truth. This statement is a clear call to arms, an assertion that Iran and its allies are not only on the right path but are also on the path to victory. But what does this mean for the everyday individual? The commander's words paint a picture of an ongoing struggle between the forces of truth and falsehood, a battle where the stakes are incredibly high. The rhetoric suggests that there is no room for neutrality or compromise, that every individual must choose a side. In this high-stakes game of chess, the lines between defense and offense are often blurred. But where does this leave the common man? Unity can be a powerful tool, especially when it comes to the world stage. But what does this unity mean for the countries involved and the world at large? In the realm of international relations, the term resistance axis has been thrown around quite a bit, particularly in the Iranian regime mouthpiece, Kayhan's article. But what does it mean? In essence, the resistance axis refers to a coalition of forces that refuse to bow to what they perceive as the dictatorship of the West, particularly the United States. These forces, united under the banner of Islam, have pledged to continue their resistance against perceived oppression, regardless of the pain and torment they might endure. This unity is not without its implications. On one hand, it presents a formidable front against the forces they perceive as oppressors. The resistance axis, comprising entities like Hezbollah in Lebanon, Ansar Allah, or the Houthis in Yemen, al-Hashd al-Shabi in Iraq, and Hamas, have taken up the mantle of Qasem Soleimani's unfinished mission against America and Israel. They perceive each day that Zionism exists as a betrayal of mankind and a crime against humanity. However, on the other hand, this unity has also intensified the conflict and deepened the divide between the West and the Middle East. The resistance axis's actions have resulted in sanctions and retaliatory measures that have not only impacted the countries involved, but also the global economy and international relations. Moreover, it's worth noting that while the resistance axis stands united, it's the ordinary people who often bear the brunt of the consequences. From economic sanctions to violent conflicts, it's the citizens who pay the price for the actions of their leaders. The resistance axis stands united, but at what cost? And who ultimately pays the price? As we've seen, the face of international relations is ever-changing. But what can we expect from the future? The concept of harsh vengeance has been a consistent theme in Iran's rhetoric, with the country pledging to retaliate against perceived enemies, including the United States. This stance has led to numerous instances of direct and indirect conflict, with the implications of this resistance axis reverberating far beyond Iran's borders. In response, the United States has implemented sanctions aimed at disrupting the operations of Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps and other elements involved in alleged terrorist activities. These sanctions have had significant economic impacts, further fueling the tensions between the two nations. Iran, for its part, remains staunch in its stance. Despite the hardship brought on by sanctions and international isolation, the country has shown little sign of backing down from its declared mission of harsh vengeance. This determination, coupled with the country's continued involvement in regional conflicts, has kept the threat of a broader conflict alive. The resistance axis, a coalition of forces opposing perceived Western dominance, has become a significant factor in the region. With groups such as Hezbollah in Lebanon, Ansar Allah in Yemen, and al-Hashd al-Shabi in Iraq, the resistance axis has the potential to dramatically shape the geopolitical landscape. Considering these factors, the future of US-Iran relations remains uncertain. Will the harsh vengeance rhetoric lead to a further escalation of hostilities, Or will the economic pressure from sanctions eventually push Iran towards a diplomatic resolution? There are also other potential scenarios. For instance, a change in leadership in either country could shift the dynamics of the relationship. Alternatively, external factors such as the involvement of other global powers could also influence the future course of US-Iran relations. In the end, only time will tell whether revenge or diplomacy will shape the future of US-Iran relations.